Hi everybody, welcome to March, welcome to almost spring. I'm excited to be here, I'm glad that you're back. If this is your first time, I'm glad that you're here. And so we have a kind of unassuming looking painting today. It's not super complicated looking, but I think that it's super impactful. And I thought it was so great, the super bright colors in the middle surrounded by the super dark outside. So I'm really excited about this one. I hope you guys are excited too. So we're only going to be working with 3 colors today, orange, blue, and black. We are going to need all of our primaries to mix these colors, but as far as application, so blue, orange, black, and white, so 4 colors. But it's going to come out really great. I love the contrast in this particular painting, and I think anybody of any level can do this one. It's not hard in terms of detail or technique, but again, it creates such an impact in the final piece, and so I'm really excited for this. And so as always, we're going to need just our same materials. We're going to need a blow dryer. We're going to use this a few times during this particular painting, because we really want to make sure that our paint is dry in between our layers, between our orange and our blue, and then between our blue and our black. So we're going to utilize that blow dryer a few times. If you don't have a blow dryer, that's okay. Acrylic paint dries really, really quickly. So that's also the beauty of doing these pre-recorded classes. So if you don't have a blow dryer, whenever we get to the blow dryer points, just feel free to pause the video, let your painting air dry for 10-15 minutes, and then do the little tap test. Just kind of press with your fingers and you'll be able to tell whether it's dry. Don't do the wipe. Sometimes people, to test whether it's dry, they go like this and then you end up smearing the whole thing. So just lightly with your fingers. You'll also notice that when the paint dries, it will go from shiny to matte. So that's another good indicator. So just give it a few minutes if you don't have a blow dryer, or if you don't want to get paint on your blow dryer, that's okay. And so let's see, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna need our paints, our primaries. So I have my black, my white, my yellow, my red, and I have my phthalo blue today. I went back and forth deciding which color, whether I wanted to use the ultramarine or the phthalo blue. So if you only have one, you can use either. It doesn't really matter in this application. We have our brushes, we have our water, we have our rag, we have our new canvas, and that should be about all. We have somewhere to mix our paint. And so when I was making this first painting, I ended up with quite a bit of extra paint. And so I don't want that to happen to you guys, so I'm going to use this extra paint to do this new canvas, but I am going to tell you how to mix all of the paints that we need, so don't worry about that. And that's about all we need to get started. Again, not super complicated in terms of details if you're one of the people who is either new or worried about doing detail work. Don't fear that right now. We will go ahead and get started. We're going to do our background and then move to our foreground as we always do. So the background in this is going to be our color area. The foreground is going to be the black area. And then our trees, the little blue details in the trees, are going to come closest to the front. So those are going to be the last things that we do. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to start to mix up our colors. Again, if you have questions during the painting, I tune in when the videos are premiering on Saturdays. So feel free to type in the comments if you don't understand, or if a step moved too fast for you, that's totally okay. And I'll try to get on there and answer for you. So what we're going to be doing first is we're going to mix our orange. And so what we're looking for is I'll say primary orange. So the orange that you would find if you were doing a rainbow. So your yellow and your red, you're going to mix together. No white for right now. We're going to add the white later on when we get on the canvas. So just our yellow and our red for right now. Since the yellow is so light, the ratio that you're going to want to use between your yellow and your red is probably going to be 70% yellow, 30% red. Start with that. If it's too light, add a little bit more red. If it's too dark, add a little bit more yellow. but I'll tell you, if you are nervous about mixing, if this is your first time, err on the side of making the color lighter, because it's a lot easier to darken a color than it is to lighten a color that, say, has too much red in it. So if you're unsure, do a little bit more yellow than you think you need, just a little bit of red, and then add a little bit more red as you need. Okay, so I'm going to be utilizing the leftover orange that I have here. So this orange is going to turn into this deepest orange color here, and this deepest orange color here. Okay, so that's this orange in the middle. Then I have a spot of plain white that we're going to be using too. So you're going to want just your orange and your white right now. So primary, I know orange is not a primary, but I'll say your secondary orange and your plain white is all we need right now. Okay. And so I'm going to utilize this is maybe a 1.5 or 2 inch brush. If you have something bigger, you can certainly use that. This is not very detail-oriented spot right now. I would go with your bigger brush if you have one. I wouldn't use one too much smaller than this. You could do 1 inch or maybe a 3/4 inch would be fine. But don't get any small kind of rounded brush to do this, because we want big broad strokes on this part, because this is where we're going to be blending a little bit. We don't need this to be a seamless transition between the orange and the white and the orange and the white down here, but we want it to be a smooth transition, if that makes sense. So it doesn't need to be completely blurred between the two colors, but we want the brush strokes to look smooth, and you won't really be able to get that if you have a really small brush. So I would say go with the bigger brush if you have one. So I'm taking my bigger brush here. And I know I always say this, but for these blending parts, we're going to be moving a little quickly. Again, if you are nervous about the blending part, feel free to watch this next minute or so before you put the paint on, and then you can always rewind and watch again if you're not sure. But what we want to do is put on both colors while they're still wet and blend them while the two colors are still wet so that they blend easier. So if we put our orange on and then we take too long, let's say we rinse our brush, we dry it off, we get our white, if we have to pour it, get our white, start applying that, the orange might be dry already, and it's really hard to mix a wet paint and a dry paint. It doesn't really work. So try doing a kind of a quick change between your orange and your white, and I'll show you that here. Acrylics do dry quickly, but I think we can get there. So what we're going to do is we're going to locate maybe, I'm going to say right above halfway. So I'll say if this is halfway up my canvas, I'll come up maybe another inch or 2. And that's where we're going to start applying our orange. So this is just our plain orange that we just mixed up. And so we don't have to worry about maintaining this circular shape here. We don't need to paint this in a circle. Okay, we're going to paint it just straight across horizontally on the canvas, and then we're going to use the black to create the circle. So don't even have that circle in your mind right now, it's not important. We're just applying this as is, okay? And so that being said, you don't need to go all the way to the edges. With this orange, you just want to go far enough so that you know your circle is going to cover it. So what I'm saying is don't be too shy and just come in your circular form, but you also don't need to go crazy and go all the way to our edges. So this orange is going to come up, it's maybe my palm length, it's maybe 3 or so inches. Again, we're not worrying about our edges. Don't worry about that too much. And we're going to do the same thing at the bottom. We're going to come to maybe 3 or 4 inches above the bottom. These ratios are not set in stone. If yours is a little higher, a little lower, that's fine. It's still going to come out really, really nice. So don't don't get out your ruler, don't like stress about these measurements, just trying to give you an idea about where I'm going. So again, I'll go maybe my palm height from the bottom here, and I'll apply a streak of my dark orange. So the same orange that I used up here, I'm gonna do a little of this down here. Okay. So we have our two oranges. Again, we're gonna move kind of quickly. I think you can see on the top here, my orange is still wet because you can see it's like pretty shiny. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of wring out all the extra paint on my brush. Now I haven't rinsed it. I've just kind of wiped it off in my towel. You can see all that orange there. Because we want a little bit left for blending. So I just kind of squeegeed it off here. Then I'm going to dip into my white, my plain white, and I'm going to start the blend. So I'm going to come on top of the orange that we just laid down. And I'm going to start to blend it. So right here where the two colors meet, you want to go back and forth with your brush, back and forth, right over that seam, I like to call it, so where the two colors meet. You can bring this orange up if you need a little more white. Grab a little more white. Again, we're not really worrying about the circle. We just want to make sure we cover the areas that we need. So I'm making sure I get wide enough here. We're pulling this white down. You can pull some of this white down into the orange. Like I said, it doesn't need to be a perfectly smooth transition, or it doesn't need to be a seamless transition. You can have some of these little streaks in here, give it a little variety since there's not a ton of color here. And so the longer brush strokes that you do, the smoother it'll look. So see how I'm going all the way from the left to the right? I'm not stopping in between. I'm not doing little brush strokes. I'm going to go all the way left to all the way right. All right. It's a little shine on there, but that looks good to me. And so we're going to do the same thing on the bottom here. So again, we're going to dip just into our plain white. I'm not going to rinse this brush. I am just going to apply it on the bottom here. And we're gonna paint right over the seam where the orange and the white meet. That's gonna start us blending here. And now if you took a while to do the top part and your bottom part is dry, you can always add more orange back in. That's definitely not a problem, to help kind of facilitate that blending. And so if this bottom area has a little bit more, I don't want to say streakiness, but if it's a little more striped, I'll say, than your top part, that's okay. If you see, you'll see my top part's a little bit of a smoother gradient than maybe this bottom part. Has, you know, some streaks of some darker orange, some lighter orange in here. And that's okay because this bottom part is water. And so what those horizontal stripes are going to do is it's just going to kind of imply that there's water. It's going to show you a little bit of movement at the bottom. So don't worry too much about any horizontal stripes that you have going on here, especially in this bottom part. At the top, it's not a huge deal either, but especially at the bottom, feel free to leave some of those stripes in there. Okay, and we're done with our orange. So, let's see. So I'm going to rinse my brush right here. I'm going to rinse my brush. And so I have a little bit of orange left over, just a tiny bit. And looking at this, I might try to bring this orange down just a little bit more, just so I make sure I have my bases covered here. Alright, so I've used up all my orange here. I don't want anybody wasting paint. So use what you have. If you're a little unsure about whether you should, bring your colors up or down a little bit more, I would say go ahead and do it. We're going to be covering any of the area that we don't need with our black. So if your orange goes a little bit low, if your orange at the bottom comes a little bit high, we're going to go over it. So not a huge deal, don't worry about our ratios again. I don't want anybody getting out the ruler and trying to measure 3 inches from the bottom or 2 inches from the top, okay? So we are going to do sort of the same process with our blue now. So we're going to mix up our blues. And so you can see we have 3 values of the blue, and they're all going to come from the same initial mix that we have. So we're going to start with a very light blue. We're going to actually put I'll say a pot because that's what I call these little things. So if you're working on a plate or a palette or anything like that, you're going to put some amount, these are maybe a tablespoon worth, you're going to put a large amount of white, and you're actually only going to do 1 pea-sized amount of blue and 1 pea-sized amount of yellow to get this kind of color that I have. It's a little bit more of like it's like a Tiffany blue almost. It's got like that little bit of aquamarine or seafoam green in there. It's not quite a true just blue and white color. So I have a little bit of yellow in mine too. Thought it made the color a little bit richer, especially since we're only using 2 colors. Again, if you want to change up the colors, you're free to do that. So we're going to mix up our light blue first. We're going to apply that. We're going to mix our secondary blue into the first color that we mixed by just adding some more blue to it, so it's going to make it a shade darker. Then we're going to do our second layer. Then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to add a little bit more blue to the color that we had. We're going to bring it a shade darker, and we're going to finish up with our third layer here. So we're going to mix this first, this second, this third, but it's all going to go into the same pot. So you can kind of see what I did earlier. Like I said, when I was making this, I had some left over. So you can see around the edges here, this is my first color that I made, this light blue. And then there's kind of some medium blue over here, and maybe some came over here. And then this is my third value. That's my darkest blue. Okay, so you're all coming in one pot. We're not wasting any paint here. So let's go ahead and mix up our blue. So like I said, we're going to need blue, we're going to need white, and we're going to need yellow. You can use either blue that you have, either phthalo blue or ultramarine. So we're going to do quite a bit of white. We're going to do a majority of it is going to be white. Maybe 90% of it's going to be white at this point. We're going for a pretty light blue. And then I'll show you, we're going to do a pea-sized amount of yellow and a pea-sized amount of blue. So if you see, here's where I'm going to be mixing my blue. So the whole thing is filled with white. I just have a little yellow and a little blue there. Now I'm going to mix with a smaller brush, just so my big brush doesn't get spots of color in it. So sometimes if you mix, like if I tried to mix this color with that big 2-inch brush that I'm using, sometimes portions of the original colors will get stuck inside the bristles. So when I'm painting, if I had mixed with that big brush, sometimes I'll get a big glob of, say, plain blue when I'm trying to apply this really beautiful light blue. And so I don't want that to happen. So if I'm ever applying the paint to the canvas with a big brush, I'll usually mix with a smaller brush. It helps you get a more thorough mix. You can kind of scrape the bottom. I would have a hard time fitting that big brush into this little pot here. And so you can see mine here is definitely more of like a seafoam green color than my original color over here. So what I can do is I can add a little bit of blue to that. So what happened here is that I had more yellow than I had in my original painting here. I do kind of like this color though, so I'm gonna go with this one this time. So it's gonna look different than that painting, but we'll try this and we'll see what it looks like. Because again, your greens and your reds, your oranges and your purples, as long as you're kind of on the opposite ends of the what do we call it? The color wheel here. Sorry. As long as you're sort of on the opposite ends of the color wheel here, you should be good. Maybe I'll put a touch of blue in there, but still, it's definitely greener than my previous attempt over here. So we'll see what that looks like. There you go. All right, I would say ultimately I ended up with maybe a robin's egg kind of blue, that greenish blue kind of color. All right. So what we're gonna do is we'll start on the bottom this time. We're giving this top part a little bit of time to dry by starting at the bottom, because what we don't want to do is we don't want our orange and our new blue-green to blend together at the top here where the mountains overlap the sky. You want that to be as stark of a line as you can get. You don't want them to blend at all. So if you feel like your orange at the bottom is too wet once we get there, you can always pause and blow dry it. If you feel like it's just a little damp at this point, it might be dry by the time we get up there, so don't worry about it for now. But if you have any big globs of paint on there, definitely either smooth them out, you can just use your finger, kind of roll over them, use a smaller brush, hit it with the blow dryer, whatever you need to do, but don't worry about that for now. We're going to come onto the bottom first. We're going to use our same brush that we were using before. This is my 1.5, 2-inch brush. We're still sticking with that bigger brush here. So at the bottom here, my paint is dry to the touch, so no paint is coming off, but I can still feel that it is cold. So I think if I really rubbed my finger on there, some of it would come off. So it's set, but I would say it's not all the way dry. You don't need to, be tapping your paint to see when you get to that cold but not super dry point. I'm just saying that if it's not super dry at the bottom right now, that's okay. We're gonna blend it a little bit. I guess the focus is not so much on blending as it is on creating a transition. So if you look at the bottom here, some of the orange pokes through this blue here, and the colors for the most part sit one on top of the other. We're not trying to mix them in the same way that we did this. We're not trying to blend the two colors and make a new color in between the two, because it would be kind of like a tan, brown, not good color. So it's okay if they blend a little bit. That might happen because our paint is still, again, set but not maybe 100% dry. But we don't want to go over it too many times and blend the colors. We want them to mesh but not make a new color. I hope that makes sense. And so what I like to do for this transition is, instead of taking my brush vertically, so you're painting with the wide side, I like to take it horizontally, so you're only making a very thin line when you paint across. And so that will make sure that you don't blend too much. With this orange. Okay, so again, they're kind of sitting on top of each other. They're not blending together, but they're integrating, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna continue to bring this up just a little bit, not too far. All right, so we have a little transition there. Okay, and so now we're gonna hop up to the top and we're gonna start our first mountain range. So again, if your top is very wet, if it's wet to the touch, if you're getting paint on your fingers when you touch it, hit pause, give it a hit with the blow dryer, and then come back. If it's fine right now, we can just continue. And so we're gonna take our big brush, so same one that we've been using, and we're gonna create a little mountainscape here. I would say there's no right or wrong way to do this. You can do, if you want a really dramatic kind of peak in the middle, you can do that. I went for more of a valley kind of look, so I did, essentially I tried to do kind of 2 higher peaks on the sides that kind of came down in the middle. So I did that on kind of all 3 layers. So if you can see, there's usually 2 higher points, 2 higher points, and then over here like 2 high points that kind of dip in the middle. But you don't have to do that. Again, there's no right or wrong way to form mountains. They're not, you know, as long as you don't make them like right angles at the top, try not to make them too pointy. These are more, like I said, hills and valleys rather than super stiff peaks. So we're gonna come kind of up on the bottom of our orange here. Again, you can overlap a little bit. You just wanna make sure that you're not having any of your white poke through. So let's see if I run my mountain peak like this. I'm gonna come through down here. I'm gonna come up on the sides and then maybe back down on the side over here. Okay, so you see how between my sky and my mountains, I don't have any of that white peeking through. So if you imagine here what your black is going to look like. So I continued my blue a little bit off to the side so that I make sure I'm covered when I make that circle. And so I could even extend that a little bit over here, just to be safe. Again, if we don't need it, we'll cover it up, so don't worry. Okay, so we'll go round 2. And so we'll take this same pot of color, we're gonna mix a little bit more blue into it, or whichever color you mixed. If you made a purple, you're gonna mix a little more purple into it. Whatever your darker value is, you wanna mix a little bit more into it. Again, start with a small amount. You can always add more, but it's hard to lighten up a color once you've made it dark. So start with just a little bit. And what you can do is you can mix it up, get some on your brush, and then hold it up to this value that you already have here, because you want to make sure that you have a different enough value that you're going to be able to see each of the 3 layers, but you don't want to go from super dark to super light to super dark, because then you're going to leave yourself nowhere to go on that 3rd value, right? So this is going to be kind of your medium value. So start with a little. Now, if you followed my words and not my actions, you'd be mixing with your small brush. And not your big brush. All right. Yeah, so that is not looking quite dark enough for me. Let me add a little bit more. And since I do have this dark color, let me get my small brush for mixing. I'll do it the right way this time. All right, so right into that pot that we did to mix our first color, we're adding a little bit more of our darker color to get our secondary kind of mountain range here. All right, so you can see that it's quite a bit darker, but it's not a dark denim or it's not a navy blue or anything in that value range. It's still a medium color, but it's dark enough so that you could definitely tell a difference between the color that's on here and the color that's in my palette. So we're gonna roll with this. So again, we'll give the mountain range a little bit of time to dry. We'll come down here at the bottom and we're gonna start to mix just like we did this first time. So again, we're gonna take our brush horizontally. And so what I mean by that is when I say horizontally, I mean your brush is going to be long way, not vertically. Because if you imagine if you paint with your brush vertically, you're going to get a big, wide stripe. What I want is a nice thin stripe because that's what you're going to get. That's how you're going to be able to blend the easiest. So we're going horizontally with this brush stroke at the bottom here. And we're doing the same thing that we did with our orange. We're integrating the two. And now if you did it like I did, and if you got too much, so if you look, I almost eliminated this middle color here. If you have any of that middle color left, just on your brush or on your little side palette here, you can always bring some of it back in. If you don't, not a big deal. Okay. So there's our second blue on the bottom. Now we're going to add our second blue on the top. We're going to be making our second mountain range. Again, no right or wrong way to do this. The only suggestion I might have is to not make your second and third mountain ranges a direct copy of your first one. So try not to follow the same horizon line. I don't know the word for that. Try not to follow the exact same contour as your first one, because it would be highly unlikely for mountains to look like that. I mean, this is a super stylized picture, but we want to, insert some realism where we can. So we're going to create our secondary mountain range, and just for reference here, my blue is still a little bit wet, but it's dry enough that I'm going to be able to paint this over it and it shouldn't pull up. If you start painting and you feel like you are dragging your first color off the canvas, if you feel like it's pulling this blue up a little bit, take a pause. You can hit this with the blow dryer and then we can come back. Okay, so we'll make our second mountains here. Maybe I'll make this one come from way up here. Okay, so there's our second mountain range. We have our second block of color in the bottom here. And so if we're lucky, we'll have just a little bit of space left here in between. And so that's going to be left for the end of our water, our little river here. You can see pull that darkness, the darkness of that third color in at the bottom here, and our third mountain range are going to kind of meet up because they're going to be the same color, and we want them to kind of come together in that middle area. If this middle area in your painting is very big, if you have like this much space in between at this point, you can do two things. You can either fill in with this third darker color. If you have a bigger space, that's not that big of a deal. You'll just have kind of a taller mountain range, I guess. I wouldn't bring the water up too far. Make most of it mountain and just a little bit of it the water. But if you are wanting to make a fourth value, so if you wanted to take this color blue that you have now and add a little bit more blue to it to make a third value, and then if you want to add a fourth value, an even darker one, you can do that to fill the space. So you're going to do the same exact thing that we've been doing here. Each time you're going to take a step and add a little bit of a darker value. You're just going to do it 4 times instead of 3 if you have that big space. Not necessary. You can always fill in with just that fourth color, or the third color that we have. But if you are wanting to do a fourth color to fill your space, that's a kind of easy solution here. And so I'm going to go ahead. Again, I'm adding a little bit more of my blue to my main little pot here. So I just put it right on top. And so this third color value of the blue here is also going to be the paint that we are going to use to do our details. So those little shadows of the trees that you can see, the little highlights on the rocks or the cliffs, I'll say, all of that stuff is going to be done with this third value. So if it looks like you have quite a bit of this color, that's okay. We'll probably use a lot of it. So don't worry about that. So again, mix up your color, compare it to the one that's already on your canvas. We'll make sure it's dark enough. Again, you want to be able to tell the difference between that second color and that third color. You don't really want them to just blend together. You want them to stand out from each other. So I'm thinking I could go even a little bit darker. Like I said, it's easier to continue to go darker than it is to try to lighten a color that is too dark. So go slowly, sparingly with your dark colors. You can always add more, but it's hard to take away. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, still again here with my big brush. Just for the sake of time, I have 2 of these and I switched it out for my second one. But if you need to rinse your brush at this point, then go ahead and rinse that. If you used it to mix your color, if you have like a bigger space than I have, then you can just continue to use this because it'll have the color paint on it that you need. So just like we did the first time, the second time, we're going to take this color, we're We're going to come on the bottom first, give this one a minute to dry, and we're going to do our horizontal brush strokes to try to integrate these colors a little bit. A very light hand helps here. Okay. That looks like enough for me. And you'll notice here that I just kind of, my brush strokes naturally got a little bit smaller at the top here. If yours is straight up, like if you brought your dark and your medium blue all the way out to where this orange is, that's totally okay, because it's going to get covered up. You are just going to be covering up some of the paint that you did, so that's not a huge deal. But I would say maybe I'll bring it out a little bit because, like I said earlier, you want to err on the side of caution. Just make sure that you're covered in the event that, you know, you do have a gap in there, or if your river kind of snakes to one side, you don't want there to be a big empty white hole over here that your colors didn't cover. So extend it a little bit, give yourself a little buffer zone there, but you by no means need to be going all the way to the ends of the canvas. Okay. So dry-ish up here. Again, if that is too wet for you to work on, then go ahead and give this a blow dry, come back to it. I think mine should be a-okay. So we're going to make our third mountain range here. I think I'm going to stick with my little valley thing. Maybe I'll put my valley over here. And then come up. Okay. Do we see it starting to come together here? Okay, so we've got all of our mountain ranges in, we have all of our water in. If you look here, if you can kind of see where we're going here, it's going to meet in the middle here. Our river is going to kind of taper smaller and smaller until we get back to this horizon line where I'll say the sky, which is really the background, meets the water. And there is some space in there, so you can see that transition, but it's the same color in your eye kind of just plays a trick on you where it transitions from the water to the mountains. So a lot of this area on the sides here, you're not even going to see. It's going to be covered up by these little rock formations, the banks of the river, the trees and stuff like that. So I would say don't get too hung up on what these side areas look like, because they're likely going to get covered. I wouldn't want you to spend a whole lot of time perfecting those if they're going to get covered. We don't want to be wasting time here on things that are going to get covered up, because then it's going to make it so hard to paint over them. So don't worry about those too much. And so this is the point in time where we're going to pause, and we're going to blow dry the whole canvas. We want all of the stuff that we have now already to stay set where we have it. We don't want any of it to blend with the black. It's all going to be, the black paint is going to go right on top of the colors that we have. No parts of it are going to blend together. So we want this to be all the way dry. And so if you have any big globs of paint, sometimes that happens on your ridges here, where your edge of your brush is kind of dragging along, making that edge of your mountain. Sometimes your paint will like bead up here. So pay special attention to your edges here, and especially on the edges over here too. So if you look, if I drag my finger across this, I have like a big bead of paint there that is going to take a really long time to dry with a blow dryer if you have like a big glob of paint. So take any of those little edge pieces there and brush them out if they're on the edges. If they're on the inside, just pay a little bit more attention to them with the blow dryer to make sure that they are super dry. So we're gonna take a break to do that. Everything is gonna be nice and dry. Put your blow dryer on the hottest setting that it will go and the highest power level that it will go. It won't make your paint run or burn it or do anything like that. Give yourself an inch or two between your blow dryer and the canvas. And just blow dry. You can stay in one spot, you can move it around. It really won't hurt the canvas, I promise. So give it a dry, or if you're just letting it air dry, take a pause here for 10-15 minutes or so, and then we'll come back. So we're back. We are dry, and we are washing one of our big brushes, the one that we used to do our mountains and everything so far. If your big brush is hard to wash and you don't feel like washing this at this time, if you have another brush that's of similar size, go ahead and pull that out. I would say I wouldn't go any bigger than the one that we used originally. If anything, take a step down, do an inch, 3/4 inch brush, because we're going to be covering quite a bit of area with this brush, so you definitely don't want you definitely don't want something small like this. But there are going to be some, I'll say, corners that we have to get into, so somewhere medium large brush. Some other brushes that I am grabbing, so this is my big brush. I am going to grab something in the 3/4 to 1/2 inch range, again, to get in those little, if we have any corners or anything we need to get into, but still some larger space that we need to cover. This will be a good one. And then I'm getting 2 smaller round brushes also. Those are going to be for our little grass details at the bottom, our trees, things like that. Again, if we need to pull out any of these little kind of peaks in our water that we can't get to with these big guys, I'm going to recruit these little ones. So anything that looks like this, you can do the little grass details and the tree details with a flat brush too. So if you only have something that looks like one of these, you can always turn them. Let's see, turn them, yeah. And they kind of turn into those skinny brushes. So it's about how you hold these two. If you only have brushes that look like this, you definitely can use them. But you're just going to have to make sure you're turning them on your edge so you get those thin lines. And I'll show you how to do that when we get there. But if you only have these, that's totally okay. So we're going to prepare our brushes here. And so we're going to need 2 colors from here on out. We're going to need our black. We're going to need quite a bit. So give yourself, a little spot of that on your palette here. And we're going to be using the darkest blue that we made when we were doing our mountains and our water. And so that's where our little details in our trees and our rocks and some of our grasses is going to come in. It might be a little hard to see from back there, but if you look on here, we have some rock kind of formations here. We have our little highlights in our trees. We have some of this over here, a little grass at the bottom, and that is the same exact color as these two. So we'll have some of this, you should have some of that left over from when we made our mountain, because we made quite a bit of the color, but we didn't use a lot of the color on the mountain. If you don't have any of that color left, that's okay. Just mix up a dark version of whatever color that you used, a dark blue, a dark purple, a dark green, whatever it is that you used here. It doesn't have to be identical because we're not doing anything to the mountain or the water. These are kind of details on the side. So if you do need to mix another color, don't worry about getting it exact. It just has to be, again, a dark value that kind of looks somewhere in the same family as this color. Okay, so again, I'm starting with my big guy. If you have something similar to this, similar to what we used in this background area, go ahead and pull that out. So we're going to start at the top here by making our circle for our sun. And the tip that I'm going to give here is that start larger than you think you need, because few of us, myself included, can make a perfect circle the first time. If you do your first brush stroke the exact size that you want your sun, chances are one side of it's going to be a little wonky, and you're going to want to fix it, which is going to make it get a little smaller and a little smaller every time, and then before you know it, your sun's going to be this big, and 75% of your picture is going to be black. So make it bigger than you think you need it. You'll get a nice shape. Once you kind of, you fix this side, you fix this side a little bit, it's going to get a little smaller naturally, but then you should end up around the size that you want. So we're going to start broad. We're going to come in strategically. Okay. So I'll load up my brush. My canvas should be dry. Yeah, canvas is dry. So again, the first brush stroke that I'm going to do is pretty much just going to cover this orange area. I'm not going to come way in here. I'm going to start way on the outside here. So let's just get an idea for what we're working with here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in these outsides, because I know I'm not going to need that. Make sure to get your top edge, your side edges, if you are doing those. This one will be easy because all of your sides are going to be black, because the color doesn't break the edge of the canvas anywhere. So if you want to do them after, you can definitely do that. It'll be easy enough. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just chop a little bit off, a little bit closer to the center each time we go, until we get a size and a shape that we like. Okay? So I'm stopping at about where my mountains are. I'm doing long brush strokes. I'm not stopping in between. I'm not doing this kind of brush stroke where you pick up and put down a lot of times. I want one solid motion as much as we can. Okay. I'm going to call it there because it's one of those things that you'll just keep working on. And like I said, you'll shrink down to like a tennis ball size. So if it's not perfect, that's totally okay. Don't worry about it. If you are very nervous about this part, don't think you can make a big circle like this on your own. You certainly could take a paper plate, a dinner plate. I don't know. I have like my lid to my paint palette here, anything that's circular. If you wanted to put it down, kind of trace it to get your perfect circle, you could do that. If that's going to take some of the anxiety away. I don't want you to feel like you have to do that though. If your circle isn't super, super perfect, it's not going to ruin the whole thing. So I would say give it a try first without tracing, and then if you are unsure, you're really a little shaky with the brush, if you're like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it, if you really want to take something to trace, that's fine. So we have our outside pretty well covered. If you have, I'll say, there are different levels of quality of acrylic paints. There's like professional level, there's kind of student level, there's like kids level, craft level, and they all differ in terms of how much pigment they have in the paint. So if you have not as pigmented paint, which, I mean, what I'm using isn't by any means professional or super expensive paint. It's just cheap stuff you can get off Amazon. But if you have paint that's not as pigmented, that's okay. But what you might have to do is paint over the black a second time, because what you might notice is you'll run your brush over it and it will look solid black. But then if, you know, a few minutes go by and you'll notice these little kind of pockets of white will open up where you'll be able to see the dry canvas through it. So if you need to do that second pass of the black after you've had a minute or two and those little kind of bubbles have opened up, that's okay. You might just need a second round of that black, but it's just solid black. A second pass should be easy enough, and you can do that at any point. You can do the whole thing black, all the areas that we're going to fill in, and then go back and do a second layer on the whole thing. If you notice just a couple spots need it and you want to kind of touch up as we're going, that's fine too. Okay. And so we're going to continue to come down. We're going to bring our trees into the center here where the sun is, but first we're going to step down, I'm going to say our cliffs. So what we're going to do is we're going to come on the edge here where our kind of sun shape stopped. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of step in my little cliffs here. And so you're not going to see a lot of this because our trees are going to be poking up from here. It's just to kind of give us a guideline so that we can see where we're going, right? And so what you want to do with your little cliffs is you kind of want to end up, as we're coming towards the middle here, you want to end up kind of close to where your mountains and your water meet here. So if you look, I'm almost halfway in between my dark value here, my dark value mountains, and my dark value water. It kind of met up right there, so they're going to come together in the center, and they're going to meet in the middle of that blue area. So that's ideally where you want to be. And then so what we're going to do here, we kind of closed it in towards the, I'll say the mouth of the river here, and then we're going to open it back up as we come towards us in the foreground. And so this is where this second smaller brush can come in if you want. We'll go back to this to fill in all this outside part, but if you want to define your river with a smaller brush and then use just the bigger one to fill in, you can do that. Maybe that's what I'll do. So I'll put my big brush down. I'll take my smaller brush, and we're gonna kind of carve our river here. And so it doesn't need to be perfectly smooth. If you look at the edges here, they're pretty wavy in terms of like, you know, there's a little rock sticking out here, the bank is a little smoother here. So don't worry about getting it smooth. What we want to do, I'll say the main sticking point that I want to drive home here is that you want either side of the river to kind of mirror each other. So it looks like the whole river is, you know, turning. What will happen if you do them irregularly, like if your sides kind of don't match, is it will just look like a very big stream with a little little like points and inlets. So it'll kind of, instead of looking like it sways, it'll look like this. It'll just look like a big mouth of a river at the bottom. So for the most part, if you see here, you have both sides coming to the right, and then both sides kind of go to the left, and then both sides kind of come back to the right, and then they start to go back to the left. So kind of make your two sides match a little bit. And so these are going to connect to this mountain, these points here. So there's no break in between your riverbed and your kind of cliff area. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring this over to the right, and we'll bring this over to the right. And we're going to bring it to the left, and we're going to bring this to the left. I'm going to bring this guy back to the right, bring this guy back to the right. So I'm doing a little bit on the right, a little bit on the left, just so I make sure they're kind of lining up, right? Okay. So I've got my river here. I can always edit this a little bit if I want. Because again, we're just working with black, so it's hard to make a mistake here. We can always add to what we have. No stress about this. And so then what we're going to do is anything that falls on the outside of the stream is going to be black. So that's where you can pick back up your big brush here, and we can fill in, so this outside and this outside is going to be all black. So if you need 2 layers, that's fine. We'll do one now. We can always come back and do a second one later. Remember to get your left edge, your right edge if you're wanting to do those. Okay. Starting to come together, right? Okay. So let's see. Let's continue. Oops. Sorry. Kicked my little stand here. So let's continue on the bottom here, just since we're kind of already down here. So what I'm going to do is I'll switch back to my little brush, and you could even start to employ one of your smaller brushes here. If again, if you have a flat one, you can use the flat one. If you have a small round one, you can use the small round one. Whatever works better for you, or whatever you have available. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of cap the end of the river off here. So the bottom of your canvas should be black. So let me just tuck this in right here. Don't worry about this bottom being messy though, because it's going to be grass. We're going to do our little blades of grass. So if this isn't like a perfect smooth edge, it's actually all the better. So what we're going to do here is make some little blades of grass at the bottom. So if you're using your flat brush or your angled brush, I'll show you how to do a blade of grass like that. So you're going to take your flat brush, you're going to take it vertically. So again, so you want it like this, vertically up and down, not sideways. So your brush makes a thin line, and so you're going to start at the bottom here, and you're going to pull them up side to side. You don't really want them to be like straight up. I usually try to tilt them to one side or the other, because it's not we're not looking for a freshly manicured lawn here. We're looking for, you know, just some little blades on the side of a stream. Make sure you get some taller ones, some shorter ones, some thin ones, some wider ones. Give yourself a variety. What you don't really want to do is just go like this. Up, down, up, down, up, down, from left to right. And so if you have a round brush, you're going to roll your brush on your palette to kind of gather up your paint at the end there. And you're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to give them a little tilt to one side or the other. And you can come up a little bit on your left or your right side here. Okay, so we have our little grass on the bottom here. All right. Let me put my flat brush in there so it doesn't dry out. I'm going to put both my bigger brushes in my water so they don't dry out. We won't really need those anymore. I would say now is the time to kind of size down. So I'm going to continue to use my little round brush. If you have a bigger round brush, you can do that. If you have a flat brush, you can use that. But I would say the only thing to make sure right now is that you have gone down a size. Shape doesn't matter too much. Just make sure we're getting smaller, because we're getting into the little details. Not hard details, but we're getting toward the details. Okay, so here's where we're going to start to lay out our trees. And so when I say trees, all I'm talking about right now is the black trees. So these ones in the middle here. These ones on the outside that are blue, we're going to do those after. We're just talking about the ones that poke into the middle here. And so if you've been with me before, you have likely made pine trees, especially if you've been with me in the winter. I love pine trees. I think they're so pretty, and they're pretty easy to paint, especially in a silhouette version, kind of like we're doing here. So what you want to do, or what I do first, is I like to identify where I'm going to put my, I'll say, key players, my 2 or 3 bigger trees that are going to go pop up here into the center. I'm going to identify where I want to put those first. That way I'm not doing, I want to make sure they're not identical on both sides. You don't want one big one and one small one on each side where it looks like a mirror, because we already kind of have a mirroring thing going on here. You want some taller, some shorter, some wider, some skinny. Again, give yourself a little bit of variety. So I think I'm gonna have my taller one come on this side. So what I'm gonna do is I'll take my small brush with a little bit of my black paint. I'm gonna come up to where the top is gonna be. I'm gonna give myself a very light guideline. So I'm just deciding where I'm gonna place everybody right now. Maybe I'll do a smaller one here. And then we'll jump over to the other side. Kind of like this peak here. I don't really want to cover it. So maybe I'll bring one down here. Maybe I'll do a little guy down here. Okay. So your trees don't need to be exactly where my trees are. Look at your mountainscapes here and decide what you want to show and what you don't want to show. If you have a mountain over here that looks a little weird, or if the orange is showing through from the background, if you accidentally splashed a bit of black paint on there, that's where your tree goes. That's the best part about the painting. It's easy to, I don't want to say amend our mistakes, but it's easy to make the visual what you want it to be. We can make our mistakes into happy accidents. I don't want to steal from another famous painter here, but happy accidents, right? So my biggest trees are going to go here, so I'm going to go ahead and start to put those in. And so if you have a round brush like I do, what you are going to do is I always start at the top, and basically what I do is, in order to make a pine tree, I do kind of an irregular kind of squiggly line. So just kind of curling from one side to the other, and I'll show you how I do that. It's a little bit hard to explain. So I'll start at the top here. So the top is going to be the skinniest part, so you don't need too much information up here. But basically, if you see, I'm just taking my brush and kind of, I'm almost like figure eighting here. I'm kind of curling it back and forth from one side to the other. I'm not paying any special attention to certain branches, you know, I'm not trying to paint the individual pine needles here. It's very loose, very back and forth. All you want to do is make sure that you're getting wider as you're going down. So I'm getting wider here. You can see I'm kind of just scribbling here, right? So I'm running into my little mountainside here. That's cool. I'm getting close to my other tree over here. That's fine. We're just kind of curly cueing our way down here. Okay, and there's our tree. So we'll do another one here. So you're not really going to be able to see this one too much. Curly cueing my way here. So you're going to see mostly the left side of this one. Maybe I'll make this one a little skinny so you can see this guy at the bottom. Again, I'm curling my way in here. So I'll do the same over here. So we're starting at the top. You want it skinny at the top. So be kind of light-handed at the top here, but then you're just gonna kind of curlicue your way down here. Don't get too hung up on these details. Okay. And let's see, I got a little guy down here. I'm gonna make him kind of thin. All right. Okay. Now that I'm looking at it, now it looks kind of bare on this side. So what I might do, since I said I wanted this peak to show through here, I might take a tree very close to the edge over here. And so you're not going to see a lot of it right now when we're just using our black, but we'll see when we add our blue values in that he'll really pop out. So if you have one that you want to throw like on the edge of our color area here, then that's cool. We'll kind of pull him out of the background when we get our blues going in there. Okay. If you want to stick a little something down here, you can do that. Some more little kind of grass areas. You don't need to by any means. But okay. This guy's leaning a little bit. That's okay. So we have, I'll say, half of our information in there. And so I'm going to rinse this brush. I'm going to use the very same one for this next part. And so for the last part we need to put in are going to be our details that are blue. Blue or whatever that darker value you used was. So mine, it was blue. If you used purple for your mountains, if you used green for your mountains, whatever this last mountain / water value was, is the color that we're going to use for this final part. Again, if you ran out of that color, if you needed to mix a new one, that's totally fine. It doesn't need to be identical. We just want it in the same value range, if that makes sense. So you don't want a super bright color like this lightest blue to be what we do our little highlights with, because we want to convey a sense of, I'll say, soft light. If you put this super bright blue on these trees and on these little rocks here, it would look less like a sunrise, sunset, and a little bit more like a direct light. What we want to capture here is you're kind of just getting this residual, you know, like sunset light coming over these mountains. So you want your highlights here to be soft. And the way to do that is not to use a light color, but to use a color that's close to this black value. So we're going to use our darkest color that isn't black on here. And so what we're going to do is we're kind of going to repeat the same things that we did with the black, but with the blue. So down here where we made our little pieces of grass, we're going to do the same thing on the edges of the river here, but in blue. And so here where we made our little kind of squiggly trees, we're going to do that same thing, but we'll do it over here in blue. We're going to kind of define a little bit of our rock areas down here, if you can see, but we'll do that last just because we haven't done that before. So we'll kind of repeat the tree and the grass motions while they're still fresh in our head. So we'll take a little bit of our darkest blue here. And so I'm going to come on the bank of my little stream here, and I'm going to do, again, the same thing that I did with this blue here, or the same thing that I did with the black, but we're going to do a little bit of it with the blue. And so you don't need to fill in the whole edge. You don't need to run the whole length of the river here with these little grasses. Just a little bit here and there. And so what you want to make sure you do while you're doing this color part on top of the black, it's probably a little hard for you all to see. You want to make sure that you can see this color on the black. So maybe it's a little easier to see over here when it's dry. So I can very distinctly see, at least in person, that blue is here and it's standing next to the black. It's not blending into the black. You definitely can see the difference between the color that I'm adding right now and that background black color. If your last value here is too dark and you're putting this color on right now and it's just kind of blending with your dark background, you might want to add a little bit of white to it. A tiny, tiny bit, because all you want to make sure that you do is that you differentiate this background color to this color that we're adding on top right now. So they're going to be similar, but you don't want them to just muddy up. You want them to be different enough that you can see the two distinct colors. Okay, so we have our, like I said, we put a little bit of our grasses back here, so maybe we'll do a little bit of our grass back here. It's a little hard to see on this canvas. You can see a little bit down there. Oh, there we go. Okay. And so, in the same way that we just made our trees with the black, we're going to do that same motion with the blue. The difference here is we're not going to cover as much area with the blue as we did with the black. So we're not painting this whole tree in blue. We're going to highlight the areas where I'll say the light would hit the tree. So you're going to go on the side of the tree that is closest to your light, so your inside edges of your tree. So the tree's over on this side. I'm going to do the blue highlights on this left side of the tree. And so my tree's over on this side. I'm going to do the highlights on this right side of my tree. So imagine the light is coming from right here. So it's going to cast on this side of these trees and this side of these trees. Okay, so your inside corners here. But same motion, like I said before. Our little squigglies in here. And we're just kind of dotting, like I said, the left side on these trees and the right side on the other trees. Just so we get a little bit of highlight going on here. Okay, you see that? So I'm going to continue to do that for the rest of my trees. My little guy down at the bottom. This guy over here on the left. So these guys on the left side of my canvas are going to get the highlight on their right side because that's closest to the light source. Okay, so you see how that kind of makes those trees jump forward a little bit? And so you can see it's kind of just on this left side here, just on this right side over here. And so now, if we're wanting to add any more trees, you certainly could leave it just like this, just with these trees kind of coming in on your little sun here. But if you want to bulk up your forest, I'll say, we can add a few of these trees that are going to live completely inside of your black area. So they're gonna be completely in here. So like we did with the first trees, we're not gonna be adding the black first because you won't be able to see it. All we're gonna do is we're gonna do this little blue highlight that we did on these trees, but over here in the black area. So it's less information. We're adding less information to the canvas, but your eye is still gonna read it as a tree. So these are going to be a little bit less work, but I promise they'll kind of pull out in the end. So if you want to add, let's see, I added maybe 1, 2, 3 of these over here, but do whatever your canvas allows. If you have a big space on one side, if maybe your left to right side isn't very even, if you have a big space you need to fill in, go ahead and put in one of these blue trees. So let's see, I think over here I'm probably going to do one on each side, maybe here and here. And so again, not as much information we're putting in, but it's still going to read like a tree. We're going to use the same technique that we did here as we did before, kind of speckling, doing our little curly cues here. But again, this is going to be just on the half of the tree that is closest to the light source. So we're not building a whole tree here. We're kind of just doing the left side. And now we can pull a little bit of the blue into the right side. We don't want just a perfect line down the center, right? But not that much information is going to live over there. So let's see. It's kind of hard to see for you all. So something like that, right? So we're kind of just looking at not the shadow of a tree, it's going to be the highlight on a tree, but we're just kind of implying that a tree was here without having to paint the whole thing in. Maybe this will be a little guy. What do we think? Even put another little one over here. Why not? And so you can kind of take this as far as you want. I only added, maybe 2 or 3 of these other little trees into the background, but if you want like a nice, thick, dense forest, definitely feel free to add as many of these little extra trees as you want. Okay. What do we think? It's hard to show this on the camera. It's getting very reflective. There. Okay. All right, so we have most of our information in here. So this last step might not apply to your specific painting. If you have a lot of trees and you don't have a lot of open area. If you want to leave it just like this and you don't want to put any of the rocky areas in, or if you don't have a lot of information up here, see I covered a lot of my, I'll say, cliff line with trees, especially on this side. Over here I have like one little cliff spot, that little zigzag that we made that's sticking out, one piece right there. And then I'll put a little bit of rock, I'll say, formations on either side of the stream. If you don't want to do those, if you love the way that it looks right now, you can certainly stop here. It's a beautiful painting. This can be the end for you. But if you don't have as many trees and you still want a little more information to stand out from this black background, if you feel like it's a little plain, then this is where we're going to be adding a little bit of that rocky area. And I could even add some over here. And so this requires a little bit of imagination here. But we're kind of going to be looking at the areas that would be rocky. So it helps to think about, or it helps to identify the areas on your stream that already look rocky, I'll say. So if I look right here, you know, I've got something sticking up right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of outline this with my blue. And it's going to be kind of a broken outline. It doesn't need to be like one plain line. And so I made this kind of organic, rocky looking shape here, and I'm just going to continue it over here on the side. But the best part about this is that I get to make it up, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, right? Because you're just kind of building it out of what you see here. Again, they're simple. We're just adding kind of, you know, a little half a stroke here, a little half a stroke there. And it's going to sit right on top of that black. We're not blending anything, but it's going to give us a little bit of something to work on. And we're going to do the same thing up here with our little cliff. We're kind of going to just highlight this front edge here. Just a few little strokes of our blue paint, and that's going to make that cliff edge come right out there. So I'll do it over here too. We're going to take this edge that we already made with the black, we're going to highlight it with the blue, just kind of highlighting our edges here. And I'll be sure to post pictures of the finished products. They're a little bit hard to see in this, you know, the reflective camera light, but I'll definitely post a whole picture so that you can see how the details sit in here. Because again, these two values, the black and the dark blue, they're close, but they do stand out in person. So take a look out for those if you're a little bit unsure about how to do this last part. But if you've done it, then we have arrived. That's our last thing. We get those little highlights with our rock formations and our little secondary kind of hidden trees here and here. And so, as always, I encourage you, if you want to sign your pieces, sign them. I think this is a great piece because it can hang out in your house all year round. It's not seasonal. I know we do a lot of seasonal paintings, a lot of holiday, you know, Valentine's Day, Christmas, Halloween type of paintings. But this is one that you can have up all the time. And I love it because it can go in a lot of rooms because it has your blues, your oranges, a lot of different stuff. So I hope you guys had a lot of fun with this one. This one was really fun with me. If this is your first time, let me know. I can certainly answer any questions. Like I said, I'll be on when the class premieres on Saturday at 11. So let me know in the comments if you need any help. I will be there to help. And again, as always, if you all do this painting, please send your pictures to Rebecca or to the library because I love to see them all finished. And let me know if you have any ideas for our next painting.